Hey, welcome back to another Friday Tech Workshop. I'm Joseph, a Senior Developer Advocate with Appsmith, and today we're going to use a custom widget to build an image slider. We're going to use the Slick.JS library from Ken Wheeler. So shout out to Ken, appreciate you making this library open source. It's really easy to use, and today we're going to make it easy to use in Appsmith by building a custom widget that you can import into your app and then connect your data and feed in whatever images from a database or an API. I've got it set right now with some hard-coded images just to get the basics working. And so we'll see how that much works. I'm going to kind of walk through what I've done so far. And then we'll add on top of that, insert our own API and make the data dynamic. All right, let's check it out. Okay, here's a preview of what we're going to build today. I've got a start on it, but all the images are hard-coded. And I want to make this dynamic and be able to pass in the images from a query or a database. So what I do have working so far is the autoplay here. You can select an image by the indicator. There's also arrows on the side here, and you can drag and also just click and select an image to align that one in the center. And then I've also got the current slide being displayed outside of the custom widget. So this way you can detect which image the user has clicked and then maybe use that to run a query and pull up other details about that record. So before we get into the build, I just want to give a quick shout out to Ken Wheeler for making this library, the Slick Carousel. It's really easy to use. It's got tons of different options, and there's a bunch of examples here on this site. So you can just scroll through here and find the layout that is similar to what you want to use, whichever feature, if it's the auto scroll or the fade transition, whatever you're looking for, there's examples here. And then you can just copy that config. Just put in the selector for the element that you're turning into a image slider, and then you run .slick and give it this config. It's super easy to use. There's tons of different options. So today what we're going to do is rebuild what I've started here. We'll get this much working again, and then we'll swap out the data and be able to make it dynamic so you can connect your own query, your own images, and have an image slider in your app. All right, let's switch over to the editor. And I'm going to show a little bit of the code here before we start rebuilding our own. So select the custom widget and then go to edit source. And we'll look at the HTML first. So there's a section of divs here with an image, and each div has an image tag, and that's just repeating. Aside from that, there's not much going on here. There's the div that becomes the image slider itself, and there's one outer container before that. And other than that, it's just importing a couple CSS, the script, the CSS and a theme for a Slick. And then I'm using jQuery. That's one of the dependencies. I think it's the only dependency on this library. And then the minified version gets imported down here. So pretty simple on the HTML. The JavaScript, everything is wrapped in an onReady function. So there's this Appsmith onReady, and everything is defined within that. All of this code is straight out of the docs example. So there's not much extra here going on. It's just taking the example straight from the docs. We're going to walk through that next and build it from scratch. And then once we have it working again, like I have in this version that's hard coded, then we'll connect our database and be able to feed in your own images. So first, I'm going to start out with a blank page here. And we're going to do this again in a new app. I'm dragging in a custom widget. All right, and the next thing that we want to do is edit the source here, and I'm going to clear out everything that's in this example. So the custom widget has a template up here. There's actually 3. You can choose any one of these templates, and it will give you a set of HTML, CSS, and JS to create this same custom widget. 3 different examples. I'm going to clear all that out, though. And we'll start with the HTML side here. So starting straight from the docs here on JS Deliver for Slick Carousel. This was pretty easy to set up just by following the example here. So I need a head, with these links. That's the old one. Here we go. So on the HTML here, inside of here, we'll do both of those links for the CSS. And this library also requires jQuery. If you look at the very bottom here, it's in the dependencies. And I'm just going to add it now so that we don't have any issues. If you try to run the code first, you're going to see an error. $ is not defined. So doing the same thing here, copying the HTML. And we will put that at the top of this custom widget. Okay, now we need a body. Wow, I can't type today. And back to the docs, you'll see that it says right before the closing body tag that you should add this script. Right before the closing body tag, we'll put this. And then in here, we need some type of array of divs that's going to turn into the slider. So back to the example here, we'll copy this. And so I'm putting this in the body. And now we've got these 6 elements here. The divs are displaying, but they don't have that extra formatting and the styling and the buttons for a slider. It's missing all that. So it's only displaying the HTML at this point. So now we'll go over to the JavaScript side and back to the docs example. So here it shows you how to initialize it. You select an element using jQuery and then run .slick with some type of config object. All that's one object, and this is an example of how you would make a slider responsive. So I'm going to copy this, and we'll put that into the JavaScript side now. Okay, it says I don't have an Appsmith on ready function, and other than that, there's no errors, but it didn't change the look of this at all yet either. That's because this selector here, from the example, it's called a class of slider. But if you look at our code, I don't have that class on here. So what I'll do is add class equals slider. And now it's able to select this div, which is the outer container of the elements that we want to turn into a slider. Okay, so it's working, the dots are there, but I don't see the arrows. And that's because the width of this container, it's not giving us any room to see that really. I've got some CSS that's going to fix that, and I don't want to go through the details and spend a bunch of time on the CSS part. So I'm just going to copy what I had worked on here in my previous example. And I'll share this, and you can copy it later from the link in the description here. But what we want to do is be able to show the buttons on the side, and the width wasn't quite right before. I think I need to change give this an ID of Slick based on my CSS. All right, that's changed the width here, but it's not quite laid out right. Okay, and then one other thing I need to adjust to be able to target the outer container, I need to put another div around the slider itself. So there's the div, which is the slider, all of the divs that become the slides. And then we want to take all of that, I'm going to cut it and make a new div. So inside this div, this is going to be the container for the slider and all of the slides. And I'm just going to call this one Slick Container. Okay, so I've got some extra CSS that sets the width of the Slick container separate from the width of the outer container that all of it is in. And this part took me a minute to figure out, it wasn't showing the little buttons on the side. Let me zoom out here. There we go. The arrows weren't showing because they're extra elements that get added before and after the container itself. That's the slider. And my slider was like 100% width, and it just wasn't showing them. So make sure that you've got an outer container. You know, the slider itself is a div. It's a container for all the slides, but I found it helpful to put one more layer around that. So I've got the CSS working now. We've got the slides. Let's see, we can drag and click. All of that stuff is working based off of the options here, this config object. And so if you got any questions on how that stuff works, just check out the docs. There's tons of different properties here and methods and ways that you can customize the layout and the click events and whatnot. So next, what we want to do is connect this to our app and be able to run a query, populate the images here from our app. So let's check out the console here. Even though it's working, it says we have an error that we're missing an Appsmith onReady function. So I'm going to copy this. We need to add a function called Appsmith onReady. And then inside of here, now that I have it, it has a different error. It says onReady expects a function as a parameter. So you should have an Appsmith onReady function. And then inside of here, either directly have a function or call one, and have a function defined outside of it, and then you can call it here. So I'm going to put an arrow function inside of the onReady, and then move all of this code inside there. All right, so it's still working, and now we no longer have that error that we're missing an Appsmith onReady function. This will make sure that when we go to pass in data, that the rest of the app is ready, that the model is available, and that the custom widget can actually read our query that we're going to pass in. So next, let's add that query. Let's go ahead and get some data that we can pass into the custom widget, and then we'll make it to where it's dynamic. And if we run it again, we get different images so that we can see it update in the slider. So I'm going back to the app editor here. We'll go to query, adding a new query. And I'm going to use the randomuser.me API. So this will give us back an array of random users. It's going to be different every time. And there's also an image. I collapse a few of these down here. There is a picture property, an object inside of each user, and then it has multiple images. So I want to create an array of these images and be able to use that inside of the custom widget to generate all of the slides. So first, what I'm going to do is map over this data and get just the images, and then we can pass that into the custom widget. I'll go to create a new JS object here, and I'm going to clear this out. Okay, right here, we're going to call the function because we want to rerun it every time. And we do need to make this async so that we can await the function. So await get users.run, and we're going to set that to a variable. Call this get user images. And I'll go ahead and return that just to see where we're at. So if we return users, that's going to have a results object inside of it, or an array, actually. It's an object first, and then it has the dot results, and the results is what we want to map over. There's extra info in here about the API and the seed and page number that you're on. So what we want to do is return the results array and then map over that and get just those images. So if I put a dot map here, and for each user, we want to return the user.picture.large. And that will give us an array of those images. If I run this again, it's going to be a different set of images. The number here, it looks like, is different because it's coming from um, the ID or whichever user, and it's random each time. So we should be getting back a different set of images. But the next step would be to turn this into divs with the image tags so that it's ready to go into the custom widget. We're going to use the same format from the docs here. Oh, that's the other one. It's JS deliver. So in the example here, it shows that you want a div with that outer container, and then all of these divs that have some type of element inside of it for the slider. In this example, it's just a H tag, but we can use an image there. And I'm going to take each one of those image URLs, generate a div with an image tag in this format. So let's go back to the code here, and we've got this array of URLs. So I'm going to call that const image URLs. And we could map over this one more time. I guess that's a little inefficient to map it twice. So I'm going to make this a multi-line function. And we'll do a couple steps in here. Instead of doing two maps, I want to use this one map to return all of these URLs as a div. So right here, what I can do is turn this into a template literal. And now that we have the curly braces and we're going multi-line, we need to use a return. So I'm using the backticks, which allows me to do template literals, which is just a $sign and then the curly braces like this. That should return the same thing. If I actually return it out here, that's inside the map. We want to return image URLs. There it is. Okay, that returns the same thing, but now I'm using a template literal, so I can add some extra code around this. So what I'll do is say that we want a div with an ID equal to something. We'll fill that in here in a minute. And then close tag an image where the source equals this. And we want the quotes around that. Let's see. This. So we want the quotes to be there still after that value gets swapped into the template. And then we will close the image tag and the div. And then for the ID, I'm going to use the index from the map. Now, right now, I'm only passing in the user object itself. To be able to access the index, we need more than one parameter, so I have to have parentheses. And the second parameter there for array functions like map is the index. So now I can use that here for the ID. So let's test this out again. And that's no longer URLs, that would be like the divs. So I think I want to rename this to image divs, just to be a little more descriptive of what it actually is now. And we'll join them so that it's not an array, but rather one string of text. If you don't specify what to join it with, it's going to be commas. So right now it's an array, and each one is separated by a comma, each separate string. If I just do join, it is all one string, but it's got commas in it, and we don't want that. So we want to join it with an empty string to get rid of those commas. And now I can look at this inside of an iframe before we send it into the custom widget. So let's check that out. I'm going to drag it in an iframe. And we'll connect this to the code that we just wrote here to that output. Maybe I need to use that data here. There we go. Now this doesn't look like a slider because it's only the divs. There's no styling applied. The custom widget and the Slick library will take care of that once we get these divs into the custom widget. So this looks good for now. I just want divs with an ID and the URL there with each one passed in separately, and we can swap that out for these H tags now. So to pass that data into the custom widget, we're going to use the model. If I clear this out, I'm going to use double curly braces so I can reference the JavaScript object. Okay, so we want to pass an object into the model, and that's going to have a property with these image divs. And that's going to come from our JS object, from that data right there. So we should be able to access this data inside the custom widget now. And so we've got one object here with a single property that we're passing in. So if we go back to the custom widget and look at the reference here, the live model, it looks like it hasn't refreshed since I just added that. Let's refresh this page here. There it is. So the image divs are available in the live model now, and I can use that in place of the HTML here. So we have this outer container where the ID is Slick. I'm going to use the onReady function here. And right before we initialize this slider with .slick, before we target that element and run this on it, I'm going to update its inner HTML. So we're going to grab it with that same selector. I'm going to collapse the model here so we got some more room. And we will set this to appsmith.model image divs. And there it is. So it's that easy to replace the hard-coded divs with images from your own query. But I got a feeling it's not going to update if we rerun the query, because so far we're only using the Appsmith onReady function, and we don't have an Appsmith on model update yet. But let's try it out. We're going to have to come back here and do the on model update part. But just to see how it behaves, let's look at, I want to put a button on here to let me run that query again. So this function should rerun the get users query, and then rerun the function to create the divs. We should get back a whole new set of divs each time with different URLs. So we want to do that from the UI and see if it actually updates inside the custom widget. Okay, I'm going to connect this to my JS function. Now you can see the output of the function is definitely changing. The get user images.data is going to show the results from the last time that function ran. And every time I click this, it is updating the divs here, but the custom widget isn't responding. It doesn't know that the images have changed. So next, what we'll do, we're back to the custom widget here. I have to select it. All right, we have a bunch of code here inside an Appsmith onReady. And an easy fix for this is that we can just duplicate this and say Appsmith on model update, do the same thing. That's going to repeat a lot of code, but we could test that out real quick and then take that part of the code and make it reusable. So first, what I'm going to do is just copy all of this. And we're going to name the second one on model update. You'll see that's one of the other options there that auto completes. So when the on model update function runs, we also want it to find that element, that slider element, set the inner HTML to the current model, because that's the live model. It's going to change. So we need to re-update the inner HTML. And then here we're running .slick again, but it looks like it's not showing the CSS again. It doesn't have the buttons. The images are there. Let's see what happens when I run the query again. Now it is updating the images inside, so that's new. Before it wasn't showing the image change inside the custom widget. We got that working. but it broke the slider. There's no buttons now. So let's go back to the code here. And I'm running .slick on a div that's already a slider. It's already been turned into a image slider. So the issue is that we have to run this extra step. If we go back to the docs here, there is a method to detach or unload one of these. It's unslick. Let me find it here. Yeah, the slick method takes an option object and that initializes it. The unslick method will destroy it, and then we can reinitialize it. So let's go back to the code here, and I'm going to add an extra step that says slick with the parameter of unslick. And I think we're just about there. We do have one error here in the console, but let me see what this looks like when we rerun it. Okay, so we fixed just about everything now. We do have that one error in the console, but let's see. Yeah, the indicator dots are kind of, yeah, that is working. I think I just hit the last page there. Arrows are working, so pretty much everything's working, but what's going on with this one error in the console? Now, I've done this a couple times already, so I know what it is. This one, it's just given a generic script error. It's not real descriptive. But the issue is the onModel change gets fired at the same time as the onReady. I think that the model's going from not being there at all to the first instance of it. And you don't need onReady and model update to run the first time around. So what I'm going to do is add an extra condition that says don't do any of the stuff inside of this onModel change unless there's something in that image div. So everything from here down, I'm going to select all of the code inside the function, and we're going to say if there's no appsmith.model.image divs, then just return. The other way you could do this is if it is there, then do this stuff. So you could put that inside the if, or it just depends on the condition, the way you check it. But rather than have all of my code nested inside an if, I kind of like this format to see the condition and then it ends it. Now the rest of the code isn't nested. But that resolved the error. So everything's working. We have it dynamically feeding in images from external. I think the next thing I'd like to do is have some kind of click event, interact with the image and then do something outside the custom widget. So there's a couple different ways we could do that. If we go back to the HTML that we're generating, the divs that we're inserting, I could add a button right here, an extra tag, and give all of these a button. And then we'll add an event listener. And I can do that part in JavaScript inside the custom widget. Once it's loaded, we'll go through and loop through all those buttons and add an event listener to do something. But first, what I think we should do is create the element here. I'm just going to make a button tag, and we'll make the text will say test there. So we have a button, and then close it. And let's just see if it's showing up here. Yeah. So the next thing is what should happen when this button is clicked. We'll do that inside the custom widget. Let's see. When we run onReady here, I think this is a good time to get rid of this code duplication, because otherwise I'm going to have to say add the code to the buttons in two different places, right? We've already kind of tested that hypothesis there that got rid of the error, and it made sure that we get the same functionality here the first time it loads with onReady, as well as when the model changes. I just don't like how we're reusing a lot of that code. So it's really just this object inside the .slick. This is the config that we're reusing in 2 places. So I'm going to copy this and say const options equals this config object. And then right here, we should just be able to reference that. Okay, that one's still working. And same with this object. Down to here, I think. Yep. All right. And I'm still reusing this line. Like this could be an extra function. But the majority of all of this text now, this code is not being repeated. So since it's just a config, just an option, I can define that early outside of the onReady. But let's keep going. So the next thing that we want to do is have something on those buttons, right? We want to be able to click them and have some type of event triggered. So right here, I think we'll do it after Slick runs. And I'm going to use query selector all so that we can map over the buttons. Query selector all will give you an array, rather an iterable, but it's not an actual, it doesn't have map methods, is what I'm trying to say. So what we're going to do is first select all of the buttons. I could be more specific here, but I know that there's no other buttons. So I'm just going to get all the buttons this way. And then I'd like to use .map, but that won't work, or for each. That's not going to be available on just selecting them this way. But if you put an array around it and expand that iterable, that now it does have a for each. Just a little trick I like to use. So now that I can iterate over these with the array method, for each button, we'll do button dot add event listener. So this is getting a little long. I'm going to wrap this in curly braces here, just so I can add some returns, make this multi-line. So button, we'll add an event listener for click. And when the user clicks, first let's just show an alert just to see if it's working. That need to be a function. Windows show alert is not a function. Is it? Oh, show alerts Appsmith. I think plain HTML is just alert. There it is. I don't know if you can see the alert pop up in the recording, but it did show a pop up right here. So we have added a button to each div using the code here, where I mapped over the images that I wanted to turn into the slider. I went ahead and added the button tags here as well, but there's no on-click event because the event that I really want to add, it's going to be inside the custom widget. So we're almost there. What I'm going to do next is I want to be able to trigger an event inside the custom widget to do something outside the custom widget. Instead of just triggering an alert here, I want to trigger an event outside the custom widget, and we have to define that event. We're going back to the custom widget properties here, not the source editor. That's the big 3 pane of the HTML, CSS, JavaScript. But down here, there's some other options. There's a default event that's included, this reset event. I'm going to delete that. And we're going to add our own event. I'm going to call it show alert because we're doing the Appsmith alert now. So I'll add that event. And now that it is there, now that it has a name, now you can add actions inside that event. So by name, this is an event we can call. We can trigger it from inside the custom widget. I'm going to add an action to show an alert. And we'll say message from custom widget. Now we want to trigger that event from inside the custom widget. So back to the editor for the code inside the custom widget. When we click one of these buttons, the event that we're going to add here, it's a function that instead of calling the window alert, we'll use appsmith.trigger event. And then you pass in a string with the name of the event you want to trigger, which is show alert. So this should show a different alert now. This is Appsmith's alert. Instead of the browser window that we had a minute ago, that's firing outside the custom widget. And if we test it here, you see message from custom widget. So inside the custom widget, you can see that it has fired some event. The custom widget doesn't know what's going to happen outside of it, but it's telling you that it tried to trigger some event named show alert. And then here in the Appsmith app, it gets the message. It knows what to do with that event. So here you can chain in as many actions as you want. You can run a query. You could run a follow-up query based on the results of that, or pass something back into the custom widget, update the model of the custom widget after you run that query. So tons of different use cases. I think we got just about all the basics working here that I was going for today. We've got the slider implemented. The button works so that you can run functions outside of it. There's one part of my code I don't like, though, that we're going to clean up here. So let's go back to the custom widget. We're doing this twice, which is, it's okay. We want that model to be updated here. But I think when the model updates, I'm not adding buttons the next time around. We're redoing the image divs, which will be those blank buttons with no event listeners. And then we're reinitializing it, but I don't have the buttons here, and we're starting to repeat code again. So I think what I want to do is take all the code that's inside of here and make this a function that we can call twice. So I'm going to take all the code inside the Appsmith onReady, and I'm cutting that out of there, and we'll make this its own function. Build slider. So this equals a function. And inside of this function, we'll put that code. And then right here, we can call that function build slider. That works again. And then inside of here, I think I want to keep that if. This extra part on the onModel change is preventing it from running and causing that error on the first time it loads. So we'll leave that. And I think I still want to run unslick, and then we'll use the function to run this part. So I can get rid of this line and this. So we'll do the check to make sure there are divs. Unload, unslick that particular slider, and then rebuild it. And now let's make sure it still works when the data changes for this one. All right, I think we're good. Do the buttons have click events after it changes? Yeah, looks good. So we've cleaned up the code. It's not repeating. It's able to call just onReady. It calls a single function. On model change, we want to check and make sure there's something there. Again, this tends to fire early, so put a check for whatever it needs. I'm unslicking, unloading the previous slider, and then rebuilding it. So the code's pretty simple, pretty clean. I didn't have to modify much at all from the docs. Okay, so that's about it. I think we got everything working. Let's check it out in preview mode here. So I can refresh the images from my query. The arrows work. The dot indicators also work to select an image. And we also have this button that can call a function outside of the custom widget so that you can connect your own data and your own actions. So that's it for today's workshop. Hope everyone enjoyed. Want to give a shout out again to Ken Wheeler. Thanks for making this project, for making it open source. It's a really cool, easy to use library, and it's awesome to be able to add these image sliders to Appsmith and make this easy for everyone to just copy and paste or import this custom widget into their app. So I'm excited to see how the community uses this. Thanks again, Ken. And if anyone has ideas for future workshops or for different custom widgets, just feel free to reach out, comment below on the video, or you can check with us on Discord or the community portal. So that's it for this week's Friday Tech Workshop. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.